Hi everybody, it's Eric from Shirley Hines Land Trust. I've been cooped up so much inside lately, and I had a chance to get out to Lydick Bog for some work, and I thought I'd take a little hike, and I thought I'd take you with me to see some of the highlights. I got my mask ready because I've seen some folks on the trails, and I just want to be prepared in case they come past me while I'm recording. So I'm out here at roughly the southwest corner of the trail loop and coming up on one of our benches placed out on the trail. And you might ask, like, why is this bench sitting out in the sun? I do happen to be here pretty much midday, so that's one reason. But this area is quite unique in that there's a very big canopy gap here, and we see a lot more sun-loving plants out here. So it just kind of provides a little change of pace for when you're out on the trail. I can see out there some of the woodland sunflowers starting to bloom. And there's quite a few other things here, not really blooming yet, but some bush clover growing. There's some tick trefoils out here that are starting to bloom, and you might see these out in the field as well. And then there's quite a bit of big leafed asters I can see around, just popping up here and there. So come later in the summer, those will really be beautiful. So yeah, let's start heading down the trail a little bit. And if you've never been to the trails at Lydick, I just want to show you that there is some steep inclines. You're basically walking on two ridges that surround some wetlands. And I'm coming up on the area right now where I'm going downhill, very close to North Chain Lake, where some of the water from the wetlands at Lydick Bog move out into the lake with natural drainage. So I'm coming up here to our first little wet area crossing. But as you get down here, you can see our little bridge that crosses the stream. It's midsummer now, so there's really no water in the stream. It's somewhat ephemeral. And out to the south of us is a large marsh area that sort of connects Lydick Bog to North Chain Lake. If you're looking at an aerial map, you'll see a large area without trees. And that's somewhat just like a vegetation mat and a shrub swamp area. I am seeing here a little plant that I also see in my yard quite often. It's prunella. They call it self-heal. And then some awesome little dicanthelium grasses. I don't know if you can see that very well, but they're quite a unique little seed head, and they sort of scatter out in every which crazy way. There's a hole in the tree, likely where a lead or a branch fell off a long time ago, and there's a fern growing out of it and some poison ivy also growing up and around it. But this is a great example of a little microhabitat that forms as the tree's rotting away. It keeps a lot of moisture in there. It's always kind of collecting water and rotting away more and more. One day that will kind of rot through, and it's likely the tree will fall because of it, but it's probably got a long time. But as it forms this little microhabitat of humidity, it allows a great little place for this fern to grow. And how it got there is kind of anybody's guess. Maybe a bird dropped something in there. Maybe some spores just kind of blew in the breeze into there. On the western portion of the trail loop now, another really big canopy gap. So we're seeing a little bit more sunshine. And like I said, I'm on the second ridge now to the west. And out to the west of us is actually where the bog is. You cannot get there right now. The water is awfully deep most of the time, and the brush is really, really thick. I've been out that way a couple of times where I thought I wasn't gonna make it back. But we are working hard to get some public access out in that area, and it's a real big challenge. There's a lot of permitting and planning involved, and of course it's really quite expensive to buy these boardwalk things. So in due time, we will have some public access out there that will allow you to get into the wetlands and the bog a little bit more. But for now, it's still a really great trail. You can peek some wetlands every once in a while off the side of the trail, and I really highly recommend coming in the fall and winter time when the leaves start to fall off the trees. You get a lot better views through some of the forest. But you can very much see that things change a little bit when you're a little lower in the elevation. You see some different plants. You start to see some ferns every once in a while and different kinds of grasses. Here's a log that's down, and there's quite a few of them around here just covered in moss. And what that will do is it decays more and more. It becomes somewhat of a nurse log, again adding extra moisture and allowing things to grow on it, and eventually trees and things like that will grow out of it and replace the tree that fell down. But it's also got where the tree originally tipped up, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's a little bit of a hill and a little bit of a dent. That's what we call like a tip and mound, or hole and mound topography. And again, it provides this little nursing area where ferns start to grow, and just the habitat's just a little bit different in this little, 5 by 5 foot area. Little areas with holes in the tree that become a little micro habitat and provide a little bit of an area for new things to grow. Eventually, what you'll probably see in this tree cavity is fungus growing. I can imagine that in the springtime there's some mushrooms popping out of there. It looks like it's covered in the mycelium right now. And in here is a cherry tree that at some time lost a branch and started to form a gall. And the gall is probably in reaction to the injury, or maybe in reaction to a fungus that got in there after the branch broke off. It's sort of the tree's way of healing off an area and protecting itself so that the fungus or disease or the bug or whatever might have irritated it doesn't get to the rest of the tree. It's sort of blocking it off from getting into the rest of the tree. Unfortunately, or fortunately maybe, this tree is already dead. It just kind of ends up there and there's no leaves. And that's kind of great because it provides habitat and a snag, is what we call it, a snag out in the woods, where some woodpeckers might find bugs, and bugs will make a home, and the woodpecker will make a hole, and then something else will live in that hole, and the cycle goes on and on. So those snags are often best left alone when you're out in the woods. Another thing in this area that I really enjoy is you start to see some of the bigger boulders that are called glacial erratics. So they were left here from glacial activity, coming from who knows where, maybe somewhere up in Canada or something, pushed here by the glacier, and then left in the soil. So if you're coming from the other direction, you kind of meet these two stones on the trail, and you can see a few more of them around. It's just really amazing that we live in this place where there's all these stones from somewhat all over the country, all over the continent, that were brought here by ice movement thousands of years ago. And I've noticed a few places on my walk some really big mushrooms. I believe that these are hen of the woods on this here. There's a whole diversity of mushrooms. I see some little toadstools on the trail right here. And people often ask with mushrooms, or often with plants as well, can I eat that? The answer is do your own research on that. I don't really want to recommend what you can and can't eat, but we also don't really allow that here. It is a state dedicated nature preserve, and all of our nature preserves have the same set of rules that you can read on the website about what you can and can't do. But generally, these things are here to protect nature and observe, so please leave the mushrooms and other edible things for other folks to see, and for the wildlife to use, and so that they can just do their job in the ecosystem. That is sort of the highest distinguishment you can get. It means that this is protected here for the people of the state. And as I come out into the field is in a process of being reforested. We've planted about 6,400 trees out here. They're very hard to see right now because they're smaller than most of the vegetation. It takes quite some time for trees to grow up, and when they're planted, they're just single little whips that we get from the Indiana State Tree Nursery. So then we know they're native, and we know where they came from and that they belong here. And maybe 5 or 6 years, I think these are in their third year, maybe 5 or 6 years, you'll start seeing them pop up above the vegetation here and being a little taller, and then they kind of really take off. So You got a little oak tree growing in here. There's oaks, hickories, there's some cherries, there's some hazelnuts and other things like that that kind of serve as good wildlife habitat. Also to the west of me, there's a good shrub layer there, but there is a large wetland area that is a little bit more like a pond than a wetland in some of the areas. The water's quite deep. To mention some of the restoration, a lot of the areas around the trail, you'll see some dead brush piles. You'll see some areas that were cleared, mostly of bush honeysuckle and multiflora rose. So those are invasive plants, and a lot of that has been done with our staff and with help from volunteers. There's a little pile of brush there that's been cut and removed. And here we're coming up onto the bench. So this trail was created, this area was cleared of a lot of invasive brush, really with a lot of help from volunteers. When you're sitting on this bench, I don't know how well it shows up, pictures never do it justice, but there's a great wetland lake out there, and it's amazing habitat, really great for the waterfowl that are stopping by during migration. Also pretty great, we had a pair of sandhill cranes in there one year. So it's a wonderful little place for the wildlife to be. Somebody recently asked me what one of my favorite plants is to see every year. And I have to say, that's a really hard question to ask. There's a lot of wonderful plants that I love seeing every year, and it probably depends on the month and what's blooming. But one of my all-time favorite plants is white oak trees. And there is a really large white oak here with a great branching pattern. It's just amazing to see. And I love them just because they kind of are this iconic tree that shows strength and wisdom, and just a really big, massive oak tree with a great branching pattern that just looks great every time of the year. All right, so I'm about to head back into the field, and it's a little closer to the road this time, so it gets a little noisy. So I will leave you guys here, and thanks for joining me on this hike out at Lydick Bog. And if you need more information, check things out on our website at www.heinztrust.org.